So, I don't know how that slide got in there, or that one. Hi. So today I want to talk to you about how teaching makes you a better programmer. So you might ask if that's really the case. Yes, it's really the case. There's two things to teaching. One, it's very awesome to help people. It's very awesome to teach people. And if you feel more awesome, then you're probably also more awesome, right? So that's one reason. And the second reason is that teaching will help you learn very fast. People will ask you questions, like newcomers to programming will ask you things that you take for granted, and you'll have to explain it in a way that they actually understand it. So when I started programming, I started teaching actually right away, because it made me realize that I have to explain stuff in a way that other people understand it, and not just say, do the whole copy-paste thing, which is convenient. And the good news is for today is that you can get started right away. But the bad news is it's not so easy. So that's why I'm here. A little introduction about myself. I come from the Netherlands, and I moved to Vienna 2 years ago to work at a startup that does all kinds of reviews for lifestyle stuff. And there, like a year and a half in the job, I figured that I'm actually not I didn't want to be a community manager anymore. I've done that for 6 years, and I wanted to build stuff that was more sustainable than a tweet. Yeah, and I worked at this startup, and they did Ruby on Rails programming, and a lot of my coworkers were actually Rails girls coaches, and they told me all kinds of cool stories about the Rails girls workshops. And so I started with a Rails girls workshop, but just on my own, and one coworker would support me there. And when I start learning something, I need to have some sort of deadline that makes me pull through. So I figured I'm gonna organize a Rails Girls workshop myself in half a year. So by that time, in 6 months, I really need to know the basics of Rails, which was a very ambitious plan, but it sort of worked out. So I organized Rails Girls in Rotterdam. I organized Rails Girls in The Hague in September this year. I'm gonna organize another one in February. So if there's any coaches in the room that might want to help me out, that would be great. I also coach a lot. And the cool thing is that the startup that I used to work for actually sort of recruited me as a junior developer for 1 day a week, mainly fixing bugs, which was actually a great way to get started, because we had this eternal sort of hack week thing going on, so all the developers would work on their pet projects and not really be concerned about our users anymore or what our users needed. And as a community manager, that's all I do, right? I have to figure that what the users are doing on our website and that they're having a good time. So I would get all kinds of complaints from our users of all the stuff that was wrong with our website. And I would then go ahead for this 1 day a week that I was a junior developer to go and fix that stuff. So yeah, also that was kind of ambitious. And this whole learning thing, like looking back, I think there's a lot of stuff that I could have improved on, but also my teachers could have improved on. So I'm trying to sort of do this teaching stuff on the side a lot, and try and improve my teaching skills, and probably also other people's teaching skills. So I have a few pointers that I want to go through today. First of all, Rails Girls is great. I mean, you teach Ruby on Rails to beginners, but a lot of the girls that come into the workshop have no experience with HTML or CSS whatsoever. So we figured along the way that this learning HTML and CSS, or at least the basics of how to craft a web page, is very valuable. Especially because HTML and CSS, if you change some stuff, you see it right away in your browser. So for them, it's very visual to see that they change a piece of code, and you see the result right away. And that's very empowering. And then second, we don't touch it in the Rails Girls workshops, but in whatever workshop I give outside of the whole Rails Girls spectrum, I try and teach JavaScript. My teachers, the people that used to coach me were always like, oh, JavaScript sucks, you shouldn't touch it. And although I sort of agreed with them, it is something that you sort of have to get into, and you can't just hide from it. So yeah, JavaScript, really. And another thing, and I thought it was funny, this morning there was another talk about teaching beginners, and he used Pure, so like a framework for CSS. And in the Rails Girls guide, we actually use Bootstrap, which is also a framework. And I think it's actually pretty interesting for them to see CSS and HTML and how they interact with each other without using a framework to just be done with it. Because there's also a lot of people that attend the Rails Girls workshop that don't necessarily want to do stuff in the backend or with Ruby on Rails, but just want to make things pretty. And they should also get a chance to sort of explore that. Yes, and when I got started, and most of the stuff is like, I learned this while doing, but I didn't really enjoy it in the beginning. So for instance, my coach would always let me inspect all the elements on the page. So I would say, why doesn't this work? And he would say, inspect it. And I go, yes, but we've been on this for 3 hours and I just really want the answer. Why can't you just tell me what I have to do in the code? And he said, no, you have to inspect the element and you'll see. So yeah, even though it's sometimes frustrating, this is really important to know. Yeah, and fourth, it's really a workflow thing. So I talk to people a lot and they say, well, why Rails? Why don't you try this, or why don't you try this? And there's, of course, a lot of frameworks out there outside of Rails that are also very nice and also pretty okay to learn, I guess. But Rails has such great documentation. So I always go with Rails because it's easy to read and it's fairly easy for beginners to look up some documentation in it. Yeah, well, we see this a lot, right? That people have their favorite editor, like Vim or Emacs, and they're very passionate about it, and they try and defend it to no ends. And in the end, really, it doesn't matter. I use TextMate, and I'm proud of it. Like, I use that from the beginning on. I'm very comfortable with it. And it's great if you use Vim and Emacs, and it's both very powerful tools, but I would love to stick with TextMate. And especially for beginners, because they have no idea about this whole editor thing, or that there's different operating systems and one is supposed to be better than the other one. Really, it's about them learning, and they'll figure it out along the way. If they read some stuff about Ubuntu that they find interesting, then maybe they switch, or maybe not. And in the beginning, that really doesn't matter. So if they don't have an editor installed yet, yeah, sure, you can try and convince them that like Vim or Sublime or TextMate is better. Probably not Emacs. It's kind of steep learning curve, I guess, in the beginning. So sure, you can try and help them pick an editor, but don't force anything up on them if they already have something installed. Yeah, I really like this quote by one of my Ruby Rogues heroes. I think it's completely true what he says. I have a second one. This is actually a really good article. I'll tweet it later. Yeah, cut the crap, really. I did a course at the University of Amsterdam, Introduction to Ruby on Rails. Actually, it's hilarious that I had to do this course because I didn't do computer science or anything. And these people were all, we wanted to get them into the minor programming, and I had only been coding for 7 months when I gave this course. Doesn't matter. I did first a sort of an introduction to Rails and then an introduction into Ruby, and this whole program was totally BDD, so behavior driven. And we would use Cucumber, and for beginners that's really great because it's basically just English, and you make step definitions. Just so you say, I want this to happen when this happens, and then. So they have an idea of how they start and how they build an application. So I would say that BDD is very great when you want to teach beginners how to program. Yeah, so we have a very own vocabulary, I would say. We use a lot of terms that for us are completely normal. For beginners, it's very sort of scary. What are they talking about? Only thinking about the names that we use for gems, like capybara. I mean, it's nice, but it's kind of weird for beginners. So what helped me a lot when I started learning is that I just listened to all the Ruby Tapas, all the Ruby Rogues, all kinds of podcasts that I could just get my hands on. And I would pause them all the time if I would hear something that I didn't understand. So I would look it up, Google it, Stack Overflow it, and then go on. So in the beginning, I would pause a lot. And over time, I saw that I had to pause way less because I was like really learning the lingo. And I think that's very important. So even though it's sort of scary for beginners, if they try and do it that way, they'll get more familiar with the lingo and be less scared to also engage in a conversation with the programmer. I did this a lot. So I had another teacher, and I think that his perception of my skill level was way off with my actual skill level, because I would just be like, yeah, I understand what you're talking about, and then in the evening hours look it up quickly and learn it for the other day. And I guess that a lot of beginners do that because they just, you have some sort of coding session going on and you don't really want to stop and ask a question because you think it's a stupid question. But actually, this is a very painful point. And there's 3 scenarios that follow up after that. So you would say, yeah, but you know all about dependency injection, right? And the student would say, yeah, I know, because he wants to go on. And then either the course is ended and they're like, oh my god, this is too hard, I'm giving up. Or, like me, they try and they spend all their evenings learning about all these terms and eventually maybe also burn out and give up. Yeah, or really they feel altogether very stupid and are depressed, and that's not what you want, right? So if this happens to you and you're trying to explain something to someone and you see this sort of blank stare, but they say that they understand it, you could say, well, and in this particular case, dependency injection is great because blah, 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 but you know that, right? So that they don't feel caught, but they still get the explanation. It might be a good way to do that. A little bit related to that is know also when to stop. 3 hours of constant learning new stuff is really a lot. It's very, very heavy. So know when to stop explaining stuff or think, well, that is important, but not right now, so we can get back to it later. We'll get back to it later is a very powerful sentence, and yeah, use it. This is actually something that I did kind of wrong. So I live in Austria, and I figured that alongside of learning Ruby and Ruby on Rails, it would be smart to also learn a programming language in German, so I could talk to my coworkers and use the terms that they use. So learn the German lingo for programming. It was a very stupid idea. So I did 2 months of sort of trying to get into Java, but learning it in German. This was way too hard. First of all, because Java and Ruby have very little in common, so that was already pretty hard for me. And then also learning the same terms in 2 different languages, and then I wasn't sure what to look up anymore. So documentation in English is also, there's way more documentation in English than in German, so I would be completely confused and lost in translation, literally. But a little later, I started learning Python alongside of Ruby, and actually Ruby and Python have quite some similarities, right? And a lot of different stuff as well, but I figured that learning 2 languages in the same language, so in English, really helped me a lot of remembering stuff of how it's done in Ruby, how it's done in Python. Yeah, and for me that actually worked. It doesn't work for everybody though, but it might be something to keep in mind. Yes, and okay, so nowadays I do everything in a terminal, even if I'm just making a new folder for whatever project I'm doing. And when I teach programming, I always first show what kind of cool stuff you can do with the terminal or with the command prompt, so they have some sort of feeling of, oh my god, I can actually control what my computer does. I'm not just a consumer of whatever my computer is serving me, but I can actually make it do stuff. And that's very powerful for beginners. So they feel that they're in control and not like they're learning something and maybe at one point be able to do something on their computer. So yeah, definitely try and introduce them to the terminal. And that's actually like something we did at Rails Girls Bratislava. We did a beginner's course, we did the Rails Girls course, and the first talk was about the terminal, so they would get a little bit like acquainted with this thing and that they could make simple calculations and all kinds of stuff. And also there we started collecting questions that came up all the time or stuff that went wrong consequently. So a lot of stuff that goes wrong during a Rails Girls workshop is just because they didn't save something or they made a typo, or well, there is also this little problem with Rails 4 in one of the guides that you actually have to start your computer again. No kidding. And so we have created a little cheat sheet, and I will also share that one because it's online, of things that they can go through and see if they actually saved something, if they actually did if they did all that of the checklist, then they can go to the coach, and it helps a lot. So, as a beginner, I always felt super obliged to my coaches because they spent all their Saturdays and Sundays trying to teach me programming, and that was so awesome, and I never knew really how to thank them. But actually it turns out that there's also a lot that I can teach them. So there are some of my coaches who really want to do some stuff in communications and with social media, and they had no idea how to do that or no idea how to go about that. So I could actually teach them something, and that felt really good because I didn't feel like I was draining them with all their knowledge, but I would actually give something back. And the coach would also like that because, you know, he got something back for all the time that he spent on me. Apart from this whole thing that it's really nice to help people, of course. Yes, incredibly important, never say that something is easy, because it's really, really not easy. So you've been doing this probably for your whole lives, and that's great, and that's very nice. I envy you. I wish that I had started programming earlier. But a lot of stuff that you take for granted is really not easy, and saying that it is will make something feel incredibly stupid, and that is too bad. Another thing is that it's pretty important for them to learn how to Google and how to Stack Overflow for stuff. So you teach them maybe about Django, and they would look it up, and they would see a trailer for a very great movie, by the way, but yeah, that doesn't really help them. So if they know how to Google for stuff, and that the terminal would actually print stuff out that they could copy and paste into Google and find some answers, this is very powerful, and we take that for granted, but a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't even know how to Google properly. So that's something that you could actually teach them. Now there are some downs to when you start programming. And of course I'd rather talk about the ups, but they will come later, of course. I'll save the good news for last. When you get started, and I had this a lot, I would share a little like one-pagers that I made with my Twitter followers, or I would say that I was reading a book and I would make a screenshot of the book and send it out to the world, or a little code snippet that I had made, and I got a lot of hateful responses, not only from also from a lot of programmers, especially of course, oh, why are you learning Ruby? That's such a hipster language. Learn something proper. Or, well, me coming from social media, you're too lightheaded to do this stuff. Just keep doing the tweet thing you're doing, and that's totally fine. And also, of course, me being a woman, it's nothing that a woman should do, right? So, yeah, I got a lot of hateful responses, and it's really so bad. I actually thought about quitting Twitter and quitting all this social media stuff because it was so hateful. Luckily, I didn't do that. I also got some nice responses, but the bad ones really outweigh the good ones. So it might help you if you have a student and they are sort of, I don't know, online, to help them get past this and help them and say, well, there's actually a lot of people out there that think it's great what you're doing. Maybe they're not as vocal as these haters, but they are there. So try and ignore it. I think particularly true for people that might want to attend a meetup but are a little bit afraid because they're a beginner. So why would they attend a meetup? They have nothing to say, they have nothing to talk about. Go with them to this meetup, or give them a few pointers, or tell them, well, there's actually probably a lot of people who would love to help you or have this project and it might totally fit you, and guide them through this, because it is a scary thing to go somewhere if you feel like they're all so much smarter than you. I know, because I'm standing here and I think that you're all so much smarter than me. So, and kind of related to the whole editor or operating system question, we really like to bash, like backenders love to bash frontenders and the other way around. And we also really love to hate on PHP. Can we please stop doing that? Because it's really not a welcoming feeling for a newcomer to development. Yes. You're laughing, that's nice, but it's really, by now I really love open source, I think it's great. But if you get started and you share your stuff on GitHub, you get some really, really brutal responses sometimes. Some really stupid comments and people that list issues that are not an enhancement or anything, but more like, can you please take this offline, it hurts my eyes. I'm sorry, I'm a beginner, I'm trying to get people to help me out. So yeah, open source is kind of a brutal world, but hey, it's humans out there, so yeah, what do you expect? But help them get through it, please. So the ups, because there are a lot of ups. First of all, people rock. I've totally found out that going through meetups, actually meetup organizers love to have some newcomers in there because there's a lot of very technical talks, and then there's someone new who brings some fresh ideas or would love to see some things differently. And the discussions really change on a meetup when there are some newcomers there. It's not all like, I have this beautiful code that I just share, but have also some meaningful discussions sometimes, and that's really pretty nice because they have to explain stuff, and yeah, that's nice. And I figured that with programming, I really found a better way of finding solutions to all kinds of problems in real life, actually. So for instance, what I really picked from programming is the whole rubber duck debugging thing. So where normally I would go about a problem sitting somewhere, being really quiet, and like, oh, I don't know how to solve this. I would now speak stuff out. Sounds kind of weird because we always think of developers as very introvert people, but actually this whole debugging thing is pretty cool. So I do that in normal life as well. Normal life. Also, tell them that it's way more than the whole cold pizza, beer, and dorm room thing. It's actually developing is a very social profession. So yeah, introduce them to that because it's a really, really nice world. And a cool thing is you can gamify all the learning, right? I have a little disclaimer, like, okay, so Ruby Warrior is a very nice game to you know, you have to code a little bit of Ruby to get some levels up, but I also have something for the Python people, and that's where the disclaimer comes in. I'm gonna start working for Check.io in 2 weeks, and they do programming, they do like gaming in Python, so you have to code Python to go level up, and they have all kinds of challenges and all kinds of islands. It's really, really cute. And the cool thing about Check.io is that they have code reviews, so people can review each other's code. They actually have Guido van Rossum, who also does code reviews for Check.io, and it's a super open community, and they have a forum. And so I'll be guarding the forum so that all the newcomers will feel really, really welcome. And I'm looking forward to do that. So happy teaching. How many minutes do we have left? Super. So, questions? Yes.
Have you tried branching out to another programming language now that you have a little more experience? Like, I understand that Java is very intimidating at first. And also, Java, Python, and Ruby are all basically in the same family of languages. Have you looked at like another family, like a Lisp or a Fork or a Prolog or something like that?
Okay, first of all, so this is my 11th month of learning, or just 12th maybe, so I tried learning like Ruby, Rails, and Python, and I do also the PyLadies meetups in Vienna, so I really try to get into Python. What I'm looking at right now is Go, but it's pretty, but cool though, so yeah. But there's 2 Go talks after this, I guess, so yeah, I'll be attending one of them, yeah. That's about it.
Yeah, I found in my experience that learning a different family of language really helps me understand programming at a higher level. Like even in Python or Ruby, like knowing Haskell helps me write better code, essentially.
Cool. I will try it.
Well, what you've done so far is very impressive. I had no idea that it was only 11 months.
Anyone else?
How do you get people to come to those places where you coach? I mean, how is it advertised? I'm totally.
Okay, yeah, I mean, there's quite a few things that I do. But for Rails Girls, for instance, what we see is that a lot of people that come to Rails Girls events come from a design background, social media background, or education, and it's pretty easy to get them, as you can reach out to universities or schools and try and get them. Furthermore, all the Rails Girls events have a Twitter account, so people that are a little bit into social media will pick up on certain hashtags. And of course, it's a lot of word of mouth. So there's some people that I think would totally suit the workshop, and they will join and they will spread the word. That's mainly how we get a lot more applicants than people that we can actually teach, so it works, apparently.
Yes, in the beginning you said you teach JavaScript because it's kind of the default choice, because it's and lingua franca for all programming. Do you think it has other competitive advantages as a teaching language?
JavaScript. I'm not a big JavaScript fan, so I couldn't say that, but probably yes. Yeah, that's like the political correct answer.
Yeah.
I would say that a more accurate measure of success of such an event is how many people or girls stay in programming after the course. So do you create that?
Yes, definitely. So in the Netherlands we have Rails Girls NL, which is the foundation, and we actually do monthly meetups after the workshop, and they work on a project together. And I think that in general the numbers are that 28% of the girls stay in tech, at least. And in the Netherlands we have the advantage that a lot of girls who went to a Rails Girls event are changing their job into something more tech related, so for them it's easier to actually also attend all these meetups and continue programming. For us, it's not the goal that they've become a developer, but at least that they've seen this field of web development as a career option, and otherwise that this whole technology thing is kind of cool, and they should try and figure out if it's something for them. All right, thank you.